Hello everyone, my name is Pranav Kannan and today I'll be talking about my journey in a career in STEM. I wanted to acknowledge the Philadelphia Education Fund for this opportunity to make this presentation and share some of my experiences and what I think will this be the evolution of a career in STEM and how it can potentially be a very rewarding career opportunity going forward. With that said, let's get started with the presentation. In the next about 10 to 15 minutes, I'll first share some of my experiences, give you an outlook of where I think the world is today with a science and technology career, and then going forward where I think it's going to lead. Quick disclaimer, all views presented here are my own and do not represent any other organization, company, or party. So today I'll be talking to you about three things. That is it. My experiences, my road, my journey in STEM, what I think is the current status quo. Where are we in science technology in terms of careers, and where are we going tomorrow? This presentation makes use of these two concepts, basically a decision point and what is or can be a catalyst. I'm going to actually make use of decision points and catalysts through my career and how I have got to where I am currently and what I'm doing currently. The way I would think about this is, looking back, we have the opportunity to see what are the decisions we took and what were some influencing factors for those decisions that I call a catalyst. And of course, looking into the future, it's hard to say what the catalyst or the decision point is to be, but what I'm going to try to do is try to learn from, what were some good catalysts, how to keep looking out for some good catalysts, and how to make decisions based on, what the catalyst. So let's start, right from the beginning. I'm born and raised in Mumbai, India. It's a big city, about 20 million people, give or take, and grew up in an apartment, typical, city life growing up. And when I look back and, sort of look to see what really piqued my interest, one of the things I began to realize as I was making this presentation is a lot of our decisions are based on, access. Of course, interest and access sort of go hand in hand if we can be interested in a lot of things, but we are obviously limited by what we can access. And when I was growing up, it was only when I was about 8 years old that I actually got my first computer. So my primary access point to the world was books, and I grew up around a lot of books that were focused on science because I was sort of curious growing up. Grew up in a place where there was always something happening in school. I was pretty interested in competing in competitions in general. And one of the curious things was growing up in a very crowded city, there was not really an opportunity to indulge in things that involved the vast open expanse because we did not have any. So books became a good companion, and the curiosity with books, with my interest, sort of made it a decision point for me, and that was catalyzed by some really fantastic teachers. So, quick fun story here. I'm a vegetarian, which is makes me particularly curious about things that I don't eat, which is a lot of meat. But I've always had a fascination for biology, and one of my teachers introduced me to the first time ever I actually saw a fish in my hand, and that was might seem like a minor thing, but it left such a deep impact in me. And I think STEM is about that. A career in STEM is driven by a curiosity of things, and that's the way I look at it, and I continue to look at it. Is you're piqued by curiosity, and people around you, especially your teachers and your mentors, have a very important uh, hand in that. From there, really a big decision point in my schooling was when I decided what I'm going to do with my undergraduate degree. And again, my interest at by that time, this was just as I was leaving high school, was pretty much in STEM, and it was driven by the fact that I was looking for a career which had a financial reward. I was looking for a career which had a pretty big social reward and environmental reward, which was basically, can I, invent something? That was primarily the motivation. And this was sometime in the late 2000s, and there was a lot of activity going on in new technology, new production. I grew up in India, which was just ramping up in terms of consumerism. So a lot of people wanted a lot of things. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give engineering a shot because it is about creating new things. And again, there is of course the reality check that I have to take. So I did have other interests and I continue to have other interests, but balancing what was available in terms of good schools to go to, uh, in terms of good careers I could take, and in terms of what I mentioned earlier about what I was looking to do with my time, engineering was the bet, and I invested my time in that. So that basically took me to my graduate experience, which was again in Mumbai. And one of the big decision points for me was I was very curious, so I wanted as much exposure as I could take. And this is something I will highly encourage you all is unless you really, really cannot refrain from using the word no when it comes to new projects or new academic endeavors. It may or may not be in your field. It may or may not be something that we even might immediately like, but somebody wants you to do or somebody has asked you to do. So an example for this for me was when I was not that into programming and writing code, and it really, now looking back, I work for a software company, but my undergraduate was in chemical engineering, and um, it is time of such evolution that even chemical engineering and mechanical engineering, all these traditional disciplines, leverage computation. So I had this again a professor back in undergraduate who sort of kept nudging me to embrace it, and that exposure, despite not my initial liking, definitely has left again a very deep impact. And that brings me to the catalyst, which is I went to a small undergraduate school, only about 800 undergrads, and we only focused on chemical engineering, which meant I could sort of delve into a little bit of research because we were a research institution. And that really shaped what I decided to do next because I got to actually experience what it is. And again, I felt it as a natural outlet for my curiosity. And that brings me to what was my next decision point is what am I going to do in the next few years after my undergraduate is over. And this is in 2013. And one thing I realized was as much as I loved research, I also liked the idea of something that was applicable to a larger population, which is basically what industry and business do. So I said, well, I want to do research, but I want to do somewhere in between industry and academics. That made me apply to my graduate school, which offered a program like that. And was when I actually moved to the United States and I went to graduate school at Texas A&M in this research group called the Mary Kay O'Connor Process Safety Center. And really, the biggest catalyst for me was my mentor there, Dr. Sam Manan. And again, I keep circling back to this idea of mentorship because they really catalyze your career. They really catalyze your thought. And again, there is no one shape form for a mentor. They can be a whole group of people. It can be everyone from your friends to teachers to, you know, somebody you know through your family or somebody you might just meet at some event, but they give you that perspective that really charges you up. And what the perspective my mentor gave me or what fire he ignited in me was a passion for safety. And this safety is not just hard at safety, which is, like where you're hard at when you go to a construction site type of safety, but safety through engineering, safety through proper research. And I spent my time in graduate school while I was earning my PhD working with industries on projects associated with safety, risk assessment. I worked on developing sensors to detect corrosion. Corrosion is basically rust that we see, but I worked on pipeline corrosion because it has a huge impact in terms of what can happen if you have a pipeline leak. And again, the decision point that kept coming up for me was what projects do I do? So a typical PhD experience is when you work on one project for an extended period of time. And yes, I did do that. That was my dissertation, which was about sensors. But my professor, who was this catalyst, was this mentor who kept giving me all these other projects. And initially, I was a little resistant to it because I was like, "This is going to extend my PhD. This is not related to chemical engineering. Why are you wanting me to work with Europe?" School of Public Health and all of these other departments. But he was like, no, I think, you'll do good in it, but you'll get a lot of value. And yes, I did. One of the favorite projects I worked on was when, as a chemical engineer, STEM background, I collaborated, and this is how STEM is evolving now as you collaborate and work across multiple backgrounds and multiple branches and multiple disciplines on projects. So the project we worked on was how do you write a good procedure? So your question might be, why are you as a chemical engineer worried about it? Well, as engineers, one of the things we do all the time is actually write procedures for the processes we design. So let's say that you are cooking and you have a recipe to it. This is basically chemical engineers' bread and butter is we cook, but at a very large scale. So instead of making a few hundred pounds of cooked meat at home, what we are trying to do is making few million tons of cooked polymer in a plant. That is basically it. But of course, like how home cooking requires a recipe, chemical engineers write these recipes, these procedures, and they are extremely important, not just to make sure that the final product is good, but also things are safe. So our expertise was in writing the procedures and understanding the technical content. But the School of Public Health in Texas A&M had people whose expertise was how people use procedures. How, as a user of procedures, how do I look at it? How do I, read it? How do I assimilate it? Why would I follow it? Why would I not follow it? So as you can see, both this lock and key come together beautifully. But of course, for me going in without really knowing where all of this is going to lead to, I had to sort of, trust that okay, things will connect in the future, and it did. It was probably one of pivotal experience that shaped not just my curiosity and my experience, but also where I decided to go next. And that can be said for so many projects. And one of the things I started seeing was, oh, the industry is going to use basically a lot of data. The industry is moving from actually people doing physical things to a data-driven approach, and this data is coming through all the sensors, and that's the arc. Basically, going about spending 5 years, I started seeing this arc evolve. What I like to work with people, I like research, I like the ability to design these processes, these models, and I like the collaboration with the industry portion. And that's when I again reached a decision point, and I said, okay, do I want to stay in academia or do I want to go into industry? And by that time, I felt it was a natural choice to go into the industry. That brings me to Philadelphia, and go Eagles. And I moved to Philadelphia about a year and a half back, and now I work with this software company called OSI Soft. We are headquartered out of Silicon Valley, but in Philadelphia we have a pretty big operation. And what we do is we do something pretty interesting and unique, and we have been doing it for about 40 years. We actually provide the infrastructure, the data infrastructure, for a lot of companies to gather operational data. Now, you might ask, okay, so what is this to do with, first of all, chemical engineering? And second of all, like, what is this whole data infrastructure business? Well, let me answer the second question first. Well, the data infrastructure business is you have all these industrial facilities, from plants that make your household appliances to plants that make sure you get gasoline in your car to these industrial facilities that make medicines, so on and so forth. And they all have hundreds of thousands of sensors so that we can understand what is actually going on. All these sensors generate data. So you can have a sensor that measures temperatures, thermometer. You can have a sensor that measures pressure. And all of this data is a special type called operational data. What our infrastructure does, which is basically software, is ties into this operational data, collects it, stores it, and makes sure, and this is important, that anyone who looks at it gets the same data all the time, each time. So we have been around for about 40 years. And interestingly, chemical engineers and mechanical engineers and a lot of traditional engineering disciplines play a very critical role because we actually understand our customers who use this data. So we are talking about chemical processing industries, oil and gas industries, pharmaceutical industries, utilities, pipeline industries, data centers, all of these places where traditionally chemical engineers would be process engineers. We actually understand how these processes work, what is important for customers, how they want to use this data, how they can use this data, and make all those recommendations. So I work as a product support engineer, helping customers with our product, doing implementation, advising them, and things of that nature. So with that said, let's take a step back, like a really, really far step back, and look at the current state of the world. So typically, whenever we look at the state of the world and whenever we are designing careers, we want to understand like what is really going on. Well, at the bottom line is trade. And basically, when you're wanting to build a career in an industry, you want to make sure that the industry is such that you are able to make something of value and then sell it to a large group of people. So over the last several centuries, trade has obviously been the dominant factor in shaping what industries have prospered. So this is a map from 1400 to 1800, and you can pretty much see that where there has been more trade, they have been become more and more prosperous. Now, if we go from there to today, this is actually a beautiful map I got from this place called shipmap.org, and it basically tracked all the container ship movements in the world. And you would start seeing something very interesting is, first of all these lines, they are all container ship movements, and all these container ships carry products, and all these products are typically made by engineers. And to make all these products and all this trade and all this value, you require a lot of engineers with a lot of discipline. Basically, all of this comes down to we are in an economy which is supported fundamentally by STEM. We are supported by good science that makes great technology, which is used by engineers. And of course, at the underlying basis of all of this, and almost every discipline associated with STEM is the M, which is, mathematics supports every form from, optimization of all of these processes of engineering, of technology, and of course in many different facets it is used in almost all of these disciplines. So this is where we are today, which is why typical 20th century engineering, which is sort of what I call classical engineering, has prospered and had given the ability to people to have great traditional careers and basically support all the trade movement, and in the process obviously financially prosper. So if we look at some statistics when it comes to this, and while you all are making this decision about a career choice, is it's important to see where we are as a world right now. And as you can see, this is data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it is slightly old now, but you get the drift. It's basically for the trend. And we see that in the STEM profession itself, there is definitely an outsized impact of computer occupations and mathematical science occupations. And even when you look at the projected growth, these are enormous in terms of the number of jobs that is going to come into the market. And this is important because it's not the decision is made of where you want to go based on where the world is going. So you need to position yourself in a way that you're ready for, first of all, you're ready for where the world might be with a good likelihood. And two, you're ready with the tools in case the world is going to change rapidly, which it always does. And that is going to be the reality of our times is it's going to be harder and harder to pick a profession and always be in that, because we are just in such a fast-paced changing world. So if you can enter an occupation and get the training which gives you this broad set of skills that can be applied to multiple domains, and which is why computer occupations are anything to do with mathematics, anything to do with computer science, anything to do with data science is getting so much more prominence, is because you can apply it and really channel your passion through these skills to a wide array of disciplines. So this brings me to, why STEM as a career sort of fits into that where we need to be sweet spot. So this is the way I look at things, which is why I wanted to share this with you. And this keeps changing, of course, but really it just boils down, in my opinion, to three things. What do I want to do? And this is a question only each of you can personally answer, right? This comes from your passion, your experiences, so on and so forth. Then what skills do I have? And again, this is a personal thing because skills and experiences, keep changing, and you can always develop more skills. Say you want to do something and you don't have that skill, you can obviously work on it, get the skill, and have it. However, it's important that your career, and this is important to reflect and understand and appreciate, as your career is going to be a combination of what you want to do and what skills you have, but also what the world needs, because the world will only pay and acknowledge things that it needs. So, given the fact that these three are the circles that we have to work with, we will run into, challenges because our passion might seemingly not directly relate to what the world needs or what skills you have. And the way I believe we can reconcile that is to really take a step back and look at the world and what it is. So, as I said, you might have a passion for journalism. So, you might have the fact of the matter is journalism is an industry which is changing right now. We have data-driven journalism. So you might have a passion for journalism, you might have a passion for environment, and STEM fits beautifully into both of this because if you can add that skill of how do you work with data, you can do all of this and enter highly rewarding, both financially and personally rewarding career in data-driven journalism. So again, it's important to know that these three are always at play and you ideally want to see where if you can be in that sweet spot. And again, why STEM is going to be more and more important is because as a world, we are doing better and better. Poverty is dropping, which means people are having more consumable income. People want better qualities of life. And all of this is a great thing, but we have fixed resources. So the next about 20 to 30 years in STEM is going to be how can we optimize our resources? We have one world that we are all going to share. We live in a global world. How can we make sure that everyone is able to benefit using limited resources and really improve their quality of life? And a lot of this burden is going to come to STEM professions, but the fact of the matter is this burden is actually going to be quote unquote good for business. So if you're able to position yourself to see what people need, what you have available, and how you can convert what is available to something of value to people, your career obviously is going to be a rocket ship. You are going to add value, which means you are going to be rewarded for it. And this is important to know because we have to take that step back and look at the world as a whole, because the world is a big place, but also a small place. And trade allows you to, you know, really take trade, and the internet is now allowing us to take what you have at one place and really market it to the whole world. So I would highly encourage you all to like look at your STEM careers in that way. And again, this is one more map, and this is a real phenomenal map because this actually shows you how a lot of the data traffic in the world is going. So our internet is supported by all these undersea cables that carry all this data. And it is really amazing because this is the new economy. This is the new trade. It's a trade of data. And again, this goes back to what we saw in the earlier graphs. This is the reason computer-based professions, software-based professions, and existing professions are also adapting to software and computers because we are now in the process where we are trading data to extract value. And when we look at tomorrow, this is one graph that I would, you know, always keep in mind, and something I look at is to see, who is adopting, where is there more traffic going, where is there more traffic coming, where are people generating value out of this trade, and what are the professions, what are the sectors of the industry that's generating value using this trade. E-commerce, 25 years back, people were thinking of that as a niche thing. Today, all of us use e-commerce all the time. And e-commerce is not just one monolith. It requires everyone from typical developers to UX designers to people who understand now things like aerospace engineering, because these companies want to use drones to deliver your product. So again, it's really an exciting time, and it helps to sort of take a larger perspective as you decide your careers. It's important to be nimble, but definitely the STEM component is really the underlying thing that ties all of this together. And before I end the presentation, a couple of mythbusters. STEM career is not a monolith. Your undergraduate degree is not going to define your career. Your graduate degree will not define your career. Your first job will not define your career. Your career is all of these dots put together. So, as I said, things that used to typically be one profession based on one degree, a STEM career is a combination of this. It's you need to be ready to evolve, and you need to be ready to adapt. The second thing is skills versus expertise. Expertise definitely does come with time and experience, but skills are always available to take. We live in an open source world. You are welcome to take in whatever skills you want and train yourself in whatever skills you want. And if you spend enough time with your skills, you become an expert. So the old notion that, hey, if you have been trained in one branch of engineering or one branch of science, that is it, is changing. You can be trained in that, you can pick up other skills and then spend time in the middle of both of them and become an expert, and you have your own niche. And finally, this is a word of caution, is predictions versus reality, right? We see all these predictions, but at the same time, you know, reality and predictions oftentimes, of course, have a little bit of divergence, and it's important to acknowledge that. So we cannot connect the dots looking, forward. But what we can do is we can see what the general trend is. And as I said, those three circles, we have to sort of try to be in the middle of it. But oftentimes, we'll sometimes be out of it, and then we'll have to work our way through it. So as much as everyone talks about, this is what is going to happen, I take a more cautious approach, and I say, this is what is coming up, and this is what might look to uh, be the reality, but we have to be prepared for all the variations of it. So as I said, this is sort of the end of my presentation, but what I wanted to share was my road in STEM. As you can see, I have taken a long-winded path to where I'm here, and I'm sure it's going to be, again, a pretty adventurous road going forward, starting from my background in chemical engineering to now working for an operational data company, and everything in between. The tomorrow, the today is going to definitely be the you know really vast growth in trade, the global economy that we are in, so making products and services that help the global economy. But the tomorrow, at least based on where I see things are going, is definitely going to be in this world of a data driven economy. So a career in STEM that focuses on data, or that has the ability to use data, and various kinds of data, right? Not just data that is generated from your clicks on the internet, but data that might be generated, for example, in the domain of energy, climate, environment, and to translate that into people of value, into things of value. It's going to be the tomorrow. And finally, this is something I want to emphasize always, is you can only connect the dots looking backward and not connect the dots looking forward. Knowledge is open source. Take all of it in and build a career, based on uh, all the available knowledge to you. And again, if you want one word, literally one word to take away from my presentation, it's going to be the word open source. Knowledge is open source today, and it's really an amazing time to be in this position where you can take all this open source knowledge in. So go out there, take it all in, and really, I'm sure you'll all have phenomenal careers in STEM. So thank you all once again. Really appreciate this. Hope I could make this in person, but I'm glad that I had this opportunity to talk to you all. And this is my information. My name is Pranav Kannan. Thank you. All the best. Stay safe. Stay curious. Take care.